Hey folks, so I've been watching the news, and I think it's safe to say that we should brace ourselves for another round of protests and violence that's going to be reminiscent, if not worse, than possibly the 2020 mostly peaceful protests. And I'm going to lay out basically why I think we need to be looking at that. And first of all, people are already feeling the strain of inflation through higher gas prices, higher food prices. It's getting more and more expensive for people, harder to make ends meet. Rents are going up, mortgages going up because of the interest rates and the devaluation of our dollar. We're also seems like we're being pushed into World War III, or to the brink of World War III. We're facing the threat of potential nuclear war with Russia by people who just, for whatever reason, seem hell-bent on going into war. And, there's always protests, and violence always seems to peak during the warmer months. We're already having severe droughts and fires across the country. And then add to that the recent leak of the possible Supreme Court decision on Roe versus Wade. Now, I'm not going to get into the subject of Roe versus Wade or abortion here, but what I will say is a leak like this from the Supreme Court has never happened before. And the fact that it's happened now, of all times, seems highly suspicious to me. I believe, this is an election year. We have an election coming up. Most polls have been predicting a red wave during the election. Democrats are being predicted to lose a large number of seats. Whether that's true or not, we'll see. But the potential is there, at least according to a lot of the polls that I'm reading. To be honest, with just about every poll I'm seeing, it's predicting a major win for the Republicans. We all know what happened in 2020 before the election, the presidential election. They unleashed massive riots, and a lot of media will tell you, and a lot of the left will tell you, it's because they were fighting for equal rights for blacks. They were fighting racism and this and that and all that. And I believe some of that is true to a degree. But I also believe that a lot of those protests and riots were being manipulated by socialist and communist elements in this country that want to see this country overthrown and destroyed. So it's my belief that there's a possibility that this leak from the Supreme Court is along the same lines, that it was intended to stir up unrest prior to the election, to influence the election, just like it happened in 2020. And the reason I say that is because it's already working. It's already happening. Politicians are already calling for laws to be passed if Roe is overturned. Biden has already made comments about it, saying that he's going to make moves. And the protests have already started. You're seeing multiple protests all over the country. You're actually seeing the conservative elements of the Supreme Court. They're being targeted, and the protesters are trying to intimidate the justices in their homes. So when the decision comes out, if they do finally, let me rephrase that. If they do overturn Roe versus Wade, and the leak turns out to be true, I believe you can expect a massive uproar. Okay, people are already stressed and strained. We're already divided. As a country, we're as divided as we could possibly be, more so than we ever have in the past, with the exception of maybe the Civil War. And the reason I say that is because we haven't broke out into war among ourselves. Although you could debate that using a lot of what happened in 2020 and a lot of the violence since could be considered early stages of a war, early stages of a civil war. I honestly believe we are headed towards one. And again, if this decision is announced and it turns out that they do overturn Roe versus Wade, you're going to see massive backlash from the left. Now, I'm not debating whether it's right or wrong. I have my own views on it. I will say that, constitutionally speaking, I believe that it was bad law. I don't believe there should be any federal law for or against abortion. It should be left up to the states, constitutionally speaking. I just don't believe the government has the authority to enforce something like that. Again, I have my own views, my own opinions, but that's not what this video is about. I just believe that we should be prepared. We should brace ourselves for another round of protests, another round of violence. I could see it being as bad as 2020, the fiery but mostly peaceful summer love fest, as the Democrats kept calling it. There is the potential that it could be much worse because we have many more factors going on right now, many more things playing into it, and consider that we'll be facing possibly more food shortages. And again, when I say food shortages are coming, and I believe they're going to be severe, I don't believe that you're going to go to the store and then not be able to buy any food whatsoever. What I do believe is you're going to see more empty spots on your shelves, worse than what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. You're going to see higher prices, which we already are, but the prices are going to continue to climb. As long as they keep printing money, those prices are going to continue to climb. And right now we're sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. all that is more printing of money. So you're going to see prices continue to climb. You're going to see packages get smaller. That's already happening, and it's going to continue to happen as well. I would suggest that there's also the possibility that, just like in 2020, when all of these protests were going on, there was a run on guns, there was a run on ammunition. People were facing shortages of all of that, not being able to get it, or if you could get it, the prices were ridiculously high. I think that's something we're going to see again as well. People are so polarized in this country. We are so divided and so polarized. No one can meet in the middle and debate and discuss things. It's either us or them, and that applies to both sides of the political spectrum. It's not just the Republicans. It's not just the Democrats. It's both. It's everyone in between as well. Lines are being drawn everywhere, and everyone's taking sides. And when you start adding pressure, one crisis on top of another, a pandemic, food shortages, supply chain issues, higher gas prices, higher food costs, a war that, in my opinion, we shouldn't necessarily even be involved in. I have no problem with humanitarian aid, but we shouldn't be sending in so many weapons and military equipment to fight a war that could potentially escalate to something much, much worse. Now, I'm not saying I'm for the Russian invasion. I'm certainly not. But, right now people are scared of World War III. And it seems like every day, every step of the way, we're advancing closer to that actual World War III. And I would submit to you that currently America is at war with Russia. Not directly, but indirectly, we are at war with Russia. And I believe that if we continue what we're doing, it will be a full-blown kinetic war directly between us and them. That's something everybody seems to want it, but I promise you that's something that nobody really wants. Truth be told, nobody in their right mind would want that. Because we are closer than we've ever been to World War III. And I've heard it said that we're closer than we've ever been to nuclear war. I agree with all of that. And people will only take so much. And then you're already hearing they're already talking about COVID spreading more next fall, next winter. They're already talking about it. You've got farmers killing millions of chickens because they found one infected bird. Our food supply is under attack. Our economy is under attack. We're being forced into a war that, again, nobody in their right mind would want. Everything's getting more expensive. You're spending essentially the same amount of money, but you're getting way less for that money. Your money is being worth less and less every time they print more money. And understand that when they send out checks to people, when they send money to Ukraine, all of that is the same as printing money. It's if you take diamonds, which are extremely valuable, and if you multiplied them until they were as many as grains of sand on a beach, they would be worth nothing. And that's what's happening with our dollar. Right now, the dollar only appears to be strong because the rest of the world is going through the same thing as well. And their currency is going through a devaluation as well. They're experiencing inflation. They're experiencing shortages. And the only reason ours appears strong is because it was a little bit stronger to begin with. But understand this. We were a little higher up the level on the strength of our currency than most of the rest of the world. But as the world in general lowers in value in their currencies, their various currencies, we're right there along with them. We're just still a little bit above them, but the value is still falling. So don't be fooled. And don't be fooled by these people that keep telling you that inflation has hit its peak. I don't believe it has. So all these factors, and with what I believe to be an intentional leak from the Supreme Court, which is unprecedented, so far as I know, that has never happened before. I believe it was done intentionally to create division and unrest and to stir up Tifa and BLM and all the others, because it's already working. They're already starting up. And as the summer progresses on, as the weather gets hotter, and we get closer and closer to the elections, the midterm elections, I believe the protests are going to continue to grow and continue to get worse. I could be wrong. You know, I predicted before the 2022 election, or 2020 elections, I predicted that if the Republicans won, the left would go nuts. They would go ballistic. And if the Republicans lost, they would go ballistic. Well, you could argue that January 6th was an example. I would disagree, because that was just one, what I would say, minor event compared to what Antifa and BLM did in all of 2020. So I was wrong on my predictions there. But again, I'm predicting this year for the midterms, if there is a red wave, there's going to be major backlash from the left, because they're not going to want to give up any of the power that they've gained over the past 2 years. And a lot of their agendas have kind of stalled the past 2 years, because since the Democrats took the majority, there's been a lot of infighting even between Democrats. AOC against Pelosi, and it's just, there's been a lot of infighting. And I've seen some infighting among the Republicans as well. So it's not a one party only issue. But yeah, if the Republicans have major wins this election and the Democrats lose a lot of seats, there's going to be major backlash. If the Supreme Court's decision is in line with the leak, and they did or do overturn Roe versus Wade, there's going to be backlash on that. I find it funny, and again, to be fair, this applies to both sides, but I find it funny that the people that were demanding everybody get vaccinated, even by force, everybody be forced to wear masks, nobody has a choice, are the same people that are demanding that they have free choice when it comes to abortion. Whereas on the right, you have people that, when it came to vaccinations and masks, they demanded the right to choice, but when it comes to abortion, they the opposite is true. They don't want it. And there could be an argument made as to why for that, at least in my opinion. There could be an argument made that we're talking about the potential for spreading disease on one hand versus killing unborn babies on the other. So there is a difference there. They're not equal. The two debates are not equal. They certainly are different. But I just find the hypocrisy disgusting. We shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves over this stuff. We shouldn't be fighting with each other. We should be discussing, debating, yes, and trying to come to terms with how best to approach these things. But what I see happening is this is just another crack in the fabric of this country. It's another tear. It's just one more thing to divide us and polarize us and lead us one step closer to a civil war. And the problem with that, during the Civil War, you had well-defined lines. I mean, you had sympathizers on both sides, but you had well-defined lines. It was essentially North versus South. With this, though, is going to be very different. Because if we go through another civil war, that's not how it's going to break down. If you look at any state, let's take Georgia, for example. The state of Georgia is is a majority of Republicans for the most part. The majority of the state, I should say. I'm having trouble finding my words. The majority of the state is red. But you have these big cities like Atlanta, Savannah, Macon, Columbus that turn the state blue because they have higher populations in those areas, in those states, than we do in the rural areas of Georgia. That's why Georgia turned that, and there were some illegal things done during the election. Things that were blatantly illegal, but have been covered up, or disregarded, or excused, or just lied about. But you can take most states and do that same thing. Most red states, their cities are going to be very much blue or at least purple. Vice versa, you've got states like California, for example. There's a large number of Republicans and right-leaning people in California. The problem is, again, those city centers, those nerve centers, the large cities, tend to be Democratic. So, or Democrats rather. And again, the cities tend to be where high populations are, and those high populations tend to sway the state. Texas is another example. It's typically a red state, but you've got the major cities are either purple or blue. So there's not a defined line. You're seeing a mostly red map with a lot of big blue dots all over it. So you're not going to have north versus south or anything like that. You're going to have pockets. Pockets of one party surrounded by a thinner population of another party. And if this breaks out into a civil war in this country, there are not going to be defined lines. It's going to be chaos everywhere. And I've heard people say that, well, there's going to be a national divorce, or a handful of states might secede and split off from the union, but you've got those pockets, those major pockets inside each state that belong to one particular party or the other, and they're not going to willingly secede. They're not going to go along with it, and they're not simply going to pick up and move to whichever side is their color, so to speak. So it's going to be chaos if there is a civil war. But I'm getting off track. I honestly believe there's a strong potential for this kind of civil unrest this year. And being with all the challenges we're already facing, all the threats we're already facing, that's going to compound it and make it that much worse. And we're one step closer to that chaotic civil war. So brace yourselves, folks. Get ready. I hope it doesn't happen, but I believe it will. I really do hope I'm wrong again, like I was in my prediction for 2020. I don't want violence. I don't call for violence. But as preppers, we need to be ready. We need to have our food stockpiled as much as we possibly can. We need to be growing our own food, because if you're not growing it, you're thinking short term. You have to think long term, and you have to produce your own food as much as you possibly can. Continue to add to your preps. If you're into firearms and ammo, I strongly suggest you buy ammo now while it's available, because if there's another run on guns and ammo again this year like there was in 2020, it won't be long before the shelves are empty, and prices are already elevated on ammo. But you need to make sure you're capable of defending your family, because with shortages, people may be coming for food. You never know. You want to be able to defend yourself from rioters and protesters, not just protect your food and medicine. You also need to be taking a serious look at the security of your home. Look into security cameras, motion-activated lights. Have ways of barricading doors and windows if necessary. That's what some of this plywood I got may be reserved for. I'm going to continue to buy some. I need to build my new blacksmith shop, but I also have to consider security. So I don't know how much time we've got, But I am concerned. I am worried that later this summer we could break out into more protests, and that could potentially set off the powder keg in this country and just blow everything open. I hate to talk about doom and gloom, I really do, but I do see that potential, and if you don't, you seriously need to reevaluate things. Open your eyes. Anyway, like I said, folks, brace yourselves and do what you got to do to get ready, because we may be in for a rough summer. I'm hoping we're not, but I wouldn't bet on it. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't, and until next time, folks, take care. I'll catch you later.